Hi, my name's Daniel Jones, but my friends call me Deejay. You're listening to the Waves of Innovation podcast by Resync, in which I'll be chatting to guests to explore what the AI native future holds for us all. I'll be talking to hands-on engineers, tech leaders, and the folks who can benefit from the new possibilities that AI offers, all the while keeping it free from both hype and doom-mongering. I certainly don't have all the answers. My guests will have some, but through these conversations we can all start to understand how to make more meaningful impact with AI. If that sounds good to you, get comfortable and enjoy. In this episode, I shall be talking to Pini Reznik, who is the CEO of Resync. Before that, he was the co-founder of Container Solutions, a consultancy that was at the forefront of the cloud-native revolution, and as part of that journey, he also co-authored the cloud-native transformation book published by O'Reilly. Now, in this episode, you may hear me refer to a book on the shelf behind me. That's not really going to work for the listeners of this podcast, so you'll just have to imagine that. And now, on with the episode. This is the Waves of Innovation podcast, and Waves of Innovation is the title of your forthcoming book. Having previously co-authored the Cloud Native Transformation book, would you like to start off by explaining what Waves of Innovation is in your mind and where that title comes from?
Right. So this is something I'm doing. I guess I'm doing it since the beginning of the career, but properly in the last 10 years since I started the previous company. Consulting company in cloud native space, it's all about transformations. So there is every couple of years there is a new technology. Every 5 to 10 years there's a new massive wave of innovation, something really big that entirely changes everything. And 10 years ago it was cloud native, so I wrote a book called Cloud Native Transformation. And now I'm more or less finished writing a new book called Waves of Innovation, which is about the next wave, which is AI native. And the way I define a transformation in a book, sort of in both books, is that when the technical architecture basically forces us to change organizational structure due to Conway's law. So it's not just another tool, another piece of technology, another programming language, but something that shakes up the entire organization and requires full, effectively rebuild of the company.
Yeah, and you mentioned Conway's law there. If the shape of your architecture is determined by the shape of your human system, and from a programmer's point of view, being an engineer at heart, it kind of reminds me of refactoring projects where in a startup where we had to change. There was so much that needed changing in order to make this thing scale that we needed to not just replace the insides, but change the interfaces between things. And it was, a much grander scale thing than just swapping out individual components.
I think what we realized in the last decade is that this is actually intentional. Like, it's by design. When a change is so dramatic and it requires change of architecture from waterfall to microservices effectively, then again, based on Conway's law, every team needs to support their piece of architecture, and that basically pushes us from hierarchical monolithic organizations towards team topologies and small teams, and that requires human approach, right, and not just technology. And I think the point of both books is that it can be done correctly. So it's not just a thing that you need to struggle through, but if you actually understand how transformations work, there's a particular process to go through. And if you do it correctly, then you save yourself a lot of gray hair and a lot of trouble.
Sounds like I could have done with that. I don't know how much the grey hair and the beard is is showing up on this camera. Maybe I need a worse camera. Yes. But you mentioned there that there's a process and a way of doing it. So presumably that process has kind of emerged to you over the patterns of various customers that you've worked with, and seeing this kind of shift from what was the nascent Docker scene going into the cloud native ecosystem, and now again with AI native technologies and approaches.
Absolutely. And in early days of previous company, we really tried to sort of reinvent everything. We thought we are smarter than the world and smarter than evolution. what we realized was actually there is a particular way of doing transformations, which we, over time, working with different customers, we defined it quite strictly, which is you always need to be on the outlook for new ideas, right? You always need to be sort of pioneering, right? So exploring different things, testing new technologies, but you don't commit to those technologies until they become properly ready, and there is a sort of business case for you to actually adopt those technologies. And once you do, then you have a full commitment and you set up a small core team that actually builds an MVP, and then you scale to couple more teams and then more and more and more, and gradually you reduce your legacy and scale up your current thing. And this is not something we invented. We just expressed it in first book, and now in the second book is that this is effectively the only way to go through transformation. Explore all the time. Then when you identify the right thing, you scale, you start small and then scale over time and then transition entirely. And I think one thing that we realized, which wasn't clear when I wrote the previous book, is that a lot of companies don't reach the maturity, right? So like cloud native thing, for example, which we're doing now for 10 years since Docker started, very few companies actually getting the real value out of these complex technologies, Kubernetes, Docker, and everything else, because it requires a lot of using the tools correctly, defining the teams correctly. So there is a lot of maturity required, and companies sort of get stuck in the middle and never get there.
Yeah, the maturity required and the changes to actually adopt and adapt those technologies properly. That is a much slower, more human process, presumably, and also you kind of spot people that maybe have got stuck somewhere in the middle, where they've started that journey and they get kind of halfway and then don't quite follow through on the organizational change to back it up and to get the most out of those technologies. So they're kind of getting a little bit of the benefit, but not enough.
Exactly. It's and we even use the maturity matrix to sort of show that there is variety of different things you need to consider. It's not just about adopting Kubernetes, but changing the team, changing architecture, the team processes, team topology, all these things, they need to come together. So if you're talking about agile, and agility is about fast time to market and fast turnaround of features, you have to show them to the customer, because otherwise it makes no sense, like no value in that. So we met lots and lots of companies that they just they sort of like feeling all this effort with Kubernetes and everything. What's the point in it? Like it doesn't give me. It actually takes more time to babysit this complex tool set, and you never really get to the point of actually properly enjoying it. And now they're still babysitting the Kubernetes, still don't have proper observability, still struggle with continuous delivery and everything else. And suddenly there's AI. I'm like, now what? Now I need to go another. Like some of them just say, okay, I will take AI and put it inside my processes and it will fix everything. So that is very unlikely.
Statistically, yeah, it's probably quite improbable. Yeah.
I think this is one of the things people do, and that's exactly what people did in the past. They said takes me 12 months to deliver something to the customer, so I'll install Kubernetes, put some things in containers, and I can deliver every 10 minutes or so, or maybe every minute. But actually, you really need to have entirely new way of working, right? And we clearly saw it in cloud native. Unless you have observability, unless you have test automation, unless you have independent teams, unless you actually follow all the practices, none of it works well. And we see similar process happening with AI native.
I think going back to the kind of cloud native era and ecosystem, that there's again, from an engineering point of view, there's interesting parallels about the architecture that won out and the platform that won out, Kubernetes, being a set of convergence loops and constant kind of monitoring of state and checking, is this the way that it's supposed to be? And then when you look at an organization, so many organizations have been historically kind of fire and forget. Somebody somewhere gets an idea, we should do this, and then in brackets, I think it's going to solve some problem. The bit in brackets gets lost as it goes through the organization, and people just do it because the person in charge said so. And you don't get that kind of intelligence. You don't get going back to what you were saying about agile, of actually showing the customer and validating things. That kind of intelligent control loop seems to be missing in a lot of organizations. And then to go on some new journey and some new transformation without having that in place, it seems a lot like a shot in the dark.
I think this is totally my experience too, and it doesn't matter if it comes from top down, like CTO went to a Gartner conference and then was told that Kubernetes is a good thing, or AI these days, or it comes bottom up. Engineers really want to use Copilot and or Kubernetes for that matter, and then they insist and convince their managers. Unless it works all together, then you don't get the value, right? If you are using it as just a set of tools because it's fun and you develop your own maybe future career, I guess, if you invest in all this new cool stuff. It only works if there is a business reason to go distributed and large scale. It only works if you have good reason, but you also have good processes to get maximum out of that.
So I don't know how much of the book we can give away, whether we need to hold stuff back so people purchase a copy, or whether we're able to share all of the goodness in there. But earlier you mentioned the sort of transition from being in pioneering to adopting things when the time is right. Are there any kind of clear signals or patterns from previous tech waves as to when to know that the time is right? Does it vary by organization?
It does. I think in cloud native, in early days, we clearly told some companies that they shouldn't go cloud native because of complexity, because the ecosystem was immature and very early. There was a lot of tools to use, and generally it was a lot of effort and very little expertise available in the market and in most companies. So often we told people, like, it's you're not ready and you have no capabilities. I mean, we can help you to do it if you want to pay for that. That's fine. But generally, most companies had to wait a bit until the toolset became ready. But when we went into containers, there were just 10 companies. There was Docker, and there were a couple of companies, like one was doing networking, one was doing storage, one was doing something else. At that point, you really needed to work really hard. So most companies should not go into that ecosystem at that point. They only need to go when the ecosystem is ready. There is enough people in the market that actually understand the technology. All the main problems are resolved. This is the state with cloud native right now. It's very mature. It's complete. Most functionality available, and it's in the state of not just maturity, but continuous improvement and optimization, which is exactly what you expect from mature ecosystem. AI native is only starting. Yeah, we are super excited about ChatGPT and Copilot and Anthropic stuff. And then I'm using Gemini recently. I'm switching the models every couple of weeks. Every time somebody releases something, it's always slightly better. But it's not a ready ecosystem, and we don't even know what's going to happen and how the mature ecosystem will look like. The same way as in early days of cloud native, it was hard to say how it will eventually look like. So for most companies, I mean, if you are adventurous, you can start. I think everyone should be investing and learning about AI. But there is a big difference between research and small experiments and full commitment on full scale, rebuilding all the products and introducing AI at scale. I would not recommend doing that unless you have really good idea of what you're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, and that would be a very big bet and a gamble, and certainly to do it without the kind of intelligence mechanisms inside the organization to work out, what did we expect to get out of adopting these various AI technologies? What business outcomes do we expect to see? Which metrics are we going to track so that then we can see if we're trending in the right direction? Doing those sorts of things, or rather, making those kind of changes without the metrics in place is definitely a risky business.
And do we know what AI is good for? I mean,
It's what, yeah, certainly an emerging field, isn't it? Of, there is some use cases that are very clearly clear and apparent to everybody, and even things like developer productivity, right? So at the moment, that's something I'm researching and looking into, giving some talks on productivity in the coming weeks, and it's fascinating to see the diametrically opposed experiences that people have. You've got things like the latest Dora report showing that individual productivity goes up, but team productivity goes down. And then you speak to people. I was speaking to a friend of mine, who's a VP of engineering, the other day, who's now like, "Hey, I no longer need to hire this junior developer. I've got more bandwidth. I can hire somebody more for experience and capability rather than capacity." All the way to a CTO that I was in a conversation with a few days ago, who was quite keen. They'd set a target for their developers to write no code by the end of 2026. And at the time of recording, it's the middle of 2025. So that's quite a bold
it's very bold
vision.
statement. It's the same Dora report also said that there was expectation that the toil, the boring stuff will be replaced. And actually, that is not true. So actually, the most interesting parts are being automated by AI, which is sort of reasonable in the hindsight because that's where people want to put their effort, and AI is innovative technology. So actually, you are using it in the most valuable places, and the boring stuff is boring, right? So you don't want to touch it, regardless and with which technology. I'm really struggling with this sort of how far we got with AI. I'm really, I mean, like everyone else, I'm using AI extensively. I'm not coding these days, but I'm writing a book, and I used AI to write a book, and it took me over a year. So yeah, and even before that, I used different models, LLM models, to write, right? So English is not my native language, and generally writing as an engineer, writing for me is difficult. I'm not a professional writer, so it takes forever, and the words are not really well structured, and it's just difficult. So in this sense, AI really helps, but it was a very, very long learning experience. So when I started, it was terrible. I would ask wrong questions. It would return wrong text. It would not help in any way. I was expecting it to fill the gaps in knowledge and create new ideas, which it didn't, right? But what I learned over time is that it actually does help with writing text. Right? What it doesn't help is creating new ideas or even identifying new ideas. It can bring new ideas, not really new, but more like ideas that I wasn't aware of, or putting words in different shapes. But I still need to recognize them as good ideas and valuable and accept them. So it's still on me to trigger it to return the right text, and then recognize it, and then ask it to reframe it in some ways. But eventually, I think it opens up the ability to write to people that never did write, but still have amazing ideas. So when I hear from different publications that they would not publish a book that is written with AI, I think it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. You're losing out on great people with amazing ideas that are just struggling to put it on paper. And I think it's not about writing. It never was about writing. It's about ideas, right? It's about knowledge. So in this sense, I think in coding, I'm also struggling with where AI is, because in the past, no technology made such massive leaps in 2 years. It's really fast, really, really fast. And I do believe that 30% of developers are using AI in this way or another. I don't believe 30% of developers don't write code. I believe they are using it for assistance. But there is a lot of struggle. And if you ask me how long it will take until 30% of developers write 90% of code with AI, I really don't know how to answer this.
Yeah, I think that that is a really pressing question, and we don't know the answers yet. It's a thing that needs to come out. And you mentioned about the rate of change there. I think that people, the general populace, maybe not those working in model training and model architecture, but the general populace have been taken unawares by like, crikey, that changed very quickly. Maybe that will happen again. And we just don't know. Maybe there will be another seismic leap ahead. Maybe there won't be for another decade. But in terms of the amount of code that could be written, hopefully we'll have some guests who've got some lined up for the future episodes of the podcast who are working on AI software factories. So replacing or kind of creating agents for every step in the software development process. And it's going to be fascinating speaking to those folks about what parts of the job current AI is best suited to. I've got a kind of hunch looking at, there was a article or somebody posted on Slack, one of the many Slacks that we're all part of these days, about I think it was a Cloudflare OAuth provider that was written entirely with LLMs. Yeah. And the author originally expected it to not work and was doing it to kind of prove to themselves, you can't write security code with Gen AI. But in the end, had something that was fully functional and reviewed by humans, so the security element was still there. But those kind of situations where it's constrained and there's an interface that's already defined, I should imagine kind of filling in quite broad gaps. That certainly seems to be a strong point. Whether I trust one to define my architecture and work out how two different systems should relate, I think that's certainly an emerging problem that smart people are probably working on now, but it isn't quite ready yet.
It's I think this is one way to look at it, is when there will be a person that can write an entire product with AI. And I think we passed that time. There are people that can write entire applications using AI. You still need some expertise in software development. And we'll talk about this, I think, later. But I think it's not entirely non-technical yet. But a single person can write significant application without any help, just based on AI, and not write any code. I think it's possible today. I think this is one question to ask. And then there is another question where a majority of software development teams will be extensively using AI, because this is a very different problem. Right? Because when I look at a person like that, like the smartest engineer in Google, I mean, those people can manage, right? I think if you look in like a typical major bank with a typical development team inside their legacy application, I mean, some of them are still working on COBOL. Like, when they are going to use AI?
I've got my modern mainframe development book in the background there.
Yes.
That wasn't planned. That I didn't plan to mention COBOL in this call.
But this is a real question. It's not when there will be a possibility to write code with AI, but when the industry will move to AI entirely. And this is where I'm struggling with, right? This is where when an average developer will be able to effectively use AI to shorten their time, and they will understand what they're doing, because that will require them learning how to use AI properly. My experience shows it's not that trivial. Possible, of course. I mean, they did learn software development, so I'm sure they can learn AI. But it's also, tooling is not ready. Like, when we talk about cloud native ecosystem, a typical developer that is effectively using cloud native systems has to have internal development or target deployment platforms. Platforms are the things that concentrate the centralized expertise and knowledge and processes. Right? That's where 90% of functionality should sit, is in platforms. And you only work on a tiny, like, sort of narrow level on top of that, where you add some buttons and some functionality and you put things together in different ways. Those platforms don't exist for AI, not that I'm aware of. And more than that, because we don't yet fully understand how the AI development process actually works, we cannot even build those platforms yet. So how you can transition in a major Main Street bank with 10,000 developers, how you can transition to AI in this situation, this is something I can't see, right? This is like transitioning entire bank to Docker 0.7.
And that not being able to see it, it's very easy in hindsight, isn't it, to go and look back and go, well, of course, that was always going to happen. But when you're there in the moment, there's many different kind of branches that the future could take. And it's not clear which one is going to be the winner. And I think you and I were talking not so long ago about platforms and the fact that, undoubtedly folks are working on platform products, and there must be quite a few in the nascent stages. But until they really get out, and any kind of product development, anytime there's a new technological shift, and there are many players, and normally only one of them gets 80% of the market. So the fact that it's not even known, obvious who all of the players are yet, it's would definitely be a bold move to try proclaiming some knowledge of a strategy of exactly how is the right way to go about this.
And what I said then was that, because you sort of suggested maybe we should develop our own platform. And I said, it's very likely that the right platform is already being built. Yeah, so I do believe that there are people with more insight than I have. Not maybe you have better insight than I do, but I don't have enough insight in development processes driven by AI, or AI native development process. Now, uh, not because I'm not educated enough, which is potentially partially true, but I don't think they exist. I think for somebody to say, I fully understand how software development will be done 5 years from now with full power of AI, I think those are predictions the same way as when first Docker came out, many people predicted sort of cloud native stack. But there's a bit difference between those things, like between what we are guessing is going to happen and what's actually going to happen. But I do believe that effective platforms are being built. I think the first MVPs of AI native development platforms will be out maybe in coming year. I think. I think they will not be perfect, the same way as the first Kubernetes wasn't perfect. But I would hope that we will see AI Kubernetes within a year.
That would be nice if it happens that fast, and if the kind of winning horse in the race is so easily identifiable, because Kubernetes definitely got off to a strong start, and the writing was on the wall for all the other platforms, some of which I may have backed myself in a past life. Waves of Innovation by Resync is more than a podcast. It's a growing community where people across tech come together to navigate the AI native wave. If you're enjoying this, then please sign up to our free weekly newsletter, drop into our live events, and keep an eye out for the pattern library and book we're releasing soon. Everything we make is free because no one should surf this wave alone. Thanks for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the episode. Going back to the kind of point about Conway's law and the transformative angle here, when we're talking about platforms, it would be very easy to imagine a AI native software delivery platform to be all the things we have now, but automated to some extent with AI. But that, is a fallacious assumption. There are all sorts of other possibilities. So much of the way that we develop software is predicated on the idea that software developers' time is expensive and you shouldn't interrupt them. So what happens if you've got agents chucking out code and they can go all night and they don't get distracted and they don't get interrupted? There are all sorts of fundamental assumptions that may no longer hold.
There are a couple of things here. First is that it always amazed me, like this science fiction movies about 100, 200, 300, 500 years ahead, when they shoot lasers and they miss and stuff like that. This is crazy. I mean, you can't miss with laser weapon, like not on visible distance, obviously. Um, so I think it's sort of our nature to imagine that future technologies will do the same thing we're doing now, just in faster way. This is really, really how Docker, when it started, we were saying it's sort of like faster VMs, but that's the simple explanation. In reality, it's nothing like faster VMs, right? Faster VMs are still pets mostly, right? Very few companies actually used VMs as cattle. So in this sense, I think our inability to imagine how new technologies will change our future and our behavior, this is sort of the what pushes us to think that lasers will shoot the same way as bullet guns, right? But they won't, right? They're very different. So that's why I think forced automation, Puppet and Shift, they basically replicated human actions, right? So they sort of just executed the same commands humans would execute, just in automatically. Kubernetes, on the other side, is entirely different based, right? We are really different. It allows us to build microservices. It allows us to build independent components in different teams, not coordinating anything, not, doing long joint testing and stuff like that. So it really changes the way we work. Now, the same thing must happen with AI. I think the main reason for this is that I think there is a flip of time in software development. Uh, so right now, when we work with cloud native technologies, most of the time is going into actual development of the software. There's a bit of time on planning and architecture. I mean, it can also be quite long, but still, 3/4 at least of the time is going into hard work of building the thing. Now, if we look into AI, maybe not today, but at some point, this building software is not going to be long. I mean, if AI lives up to its promise, it means that if you express yourself correctly, then it will write the code instantly or roughly instantly. Right? It means that it's all about planning and experiment and expressing intentions. So there's sort of three major things that we humans will likely do when AI is fully functional, which is one, expressing intent. What do we actually want it to do? Two is observing that it actually does what we wanted it to do. Right? And three, ethics. So we are making sure that it doesn't break the rules that we created for ourselves or sort of exist between humans. Because those three things are distinctly human, at least at this point, until AGI came up. But basically, machines, in my opinion, don't have needs or desires or anything, right? So it's we want something. So we want to fly to the moon, we want to build a better car, we want something. And we instruct the computer to actually give it to us. And then we need to make sure that it's actually happening. But there is a problem there because we unlikely to understand what AI is doing. So we need to build the mechanisms that AI explains us what's going on and gives us an opportunity to get involved. Otherwise, it's not very useful. And the classic trolley problem, AI doesn't care. One person, five. I mean, we can try to teach it, of course. But at the end, the way I understand AI, it really doesn't care because caring is not a thing in a computer.
You mentioned there about the kind of expressing intent and then checking that it's doing the right things and it's operating within the rules. It struck me then that that's very similar to a shift in organizational thinking. And, you find some, looking at a smaller scale, you get development managers who are mostly concerned with how software is built rather than how they create a team, how they create the incentives, how they create the structure, how they create the rule set that allows their team to create the software. And I wonder if in a world full of more agents doing things, we're all going to have to get better at designing systems, designing incentives and constraints that then a thing goes and explores and finds the optimal solution to.
And how teams will look like. Because I was recently, while writing a book, I was trying to figure out how teams, AI native teams look like. So for cloud native, we know it's team topologies, roughly. I mean, you can argue about slight differences, team topologies or not, but roughly there is an agreement. There is a platform team, there is stream-aligned teams, complex subsystems, and enabling teams, right? This if you go back any agile setup, cross-functional teams, you will find exactly the same principles, just slightly different names. But those teams are still all about building stuff. But what's going to happen with teams that doesn't build anything, right? So they express intent, observe, and make sure that it's ethically behaving, right? So I was talking to multiple LLMs about this actually, and asking. And I had very interesting responses. I think roughly the responses are something like this. There will be some sort of fluid teams. So teams coming, small groups of people, 3, 4, 5 people coming together, figuring out what to build, instructing the AI to actually build it, and making sure that this is happening. So sort of this fluid, temporary, small teams that get together and disperse, and then can come together for different projects. Because the reason people need to stay 2 years together, as is expressed in agile movement, is because they need to build strong relationships so they can jointly build something big. But we're not building something big anymore, right? Or do we? This is another thing. This is assuming that once the intent is expressed, AI will do the magic and it will just happen. Is that the direction?
Yeah, I mean, will we end up being having teams of AI herders? Just shuffling the things along, making sure they don't bounce off the sides too often. The parallels with organizational thinking are strong, I think, in a world where you have people herding agentic systems and expressing intent. That means you have to be intentional about what intent you have and what outcome you expect to see. And so many times in so many projects, I've seen people just not really having a clear idea of why they're doing something. And I suspect that mindset shift might be quite big for a lot of people. It's been suggested to me in the past that the best way to suck the energy out of any creative endeavor is to ask, what problem are you trying to solve? And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I just wanted to do it because it was cool and it was going to be fun. And now you expect me to like say what value I'm going to deliver with what I'm doing. So right. I wonder if that is a parallel with kind of herding agentic systems.
I think this is really good observation, and it's there's definitely the humans are really good in sort of figuring out things, and because we are operating in larger groups of humans, eventually if one is stupid, the rest will sort of figure out somehow, right? So that's why groups of people, companies, teams eventually succeed, because eventually we build something useful. So if you have a manager that doesn't understand technology, doesn't know the business case, or doesn't know something, then they will express their intent in weird ways, and then people will translate it to something else, and then they will translate it to something else. But eventually, in every state, you have a thinking human. But what if you have a single person with AI system that doesn't have this kind of mechanism of correction? Right. So, and what if it can perform exactly what your intent is, right? And we know that humans are not very good in expressing their intent clearly, especially British ones.
Yes. With given that my other half is from Norway, yeah, she's had to get through that learning curve for sure.
But I think this is a really serious problem, right? So, it, how we balance it, how we put in what multiple humans, each one of them has its own set of references, its own ethics, it's like their own ethics, their own thinking mechanism, right? And they always can say no or yes or take things in different direction or just ignore the orders and do things. And we have, I mean, endless number of examples. Can we build AI that is behaving the same way? But how? Right? Can, should we put in the AI? Because what's happening now, which is potentially a big problem, AI doesn't tell you no. Right? It just does what you even if it doesn't know, it will still give you the answer. It's terrible. Like that's not what
Well,
humans do.
I don't know. I've worked with some consultants that.
Sometimes they do, yeah. But this is another thing. Like it's humans. Every time two people talk, they're two independent entities with their own frame of reference, and AI is just knowledge. So it actually does what you want. So there is a bit of risk and challenge in there. So that's why we need to build teams that are maybe more about making sure that what we are saying is actually what we are saying.
Yeah, and that expressing the requirements clearly and expressing intent is famously, ask any developer or product manager. Like a product manager, it's their job and they know how hard it is. And developers that have been trying to well, hang on a minute, what exactly do you mean by that English language sentence? There's an amount of kind of translating it into computation that's required.
Best developers, this is what they do basically. They figure out what the people want them to do and they do that and not other things. Right? So they actually interpret. So in a sense, yeah, that's an interesting challenge. What if I mean, AI effectively needs to interpret and not just do what it's told? Uh, is that the direction? Again, if yes, then what are the mechanisms?
Yeah. And so far, we've been talking about AI as applied to traditional software development. And of course, there are all sorts of other places that this might cause a seismic shift. I mean, you and I were talking to a manufacturing company last week who all of a sudden had lots of manual toil type processes that they could potentially automate away. And we saw lots of opportunities there to make things a lot quicker for them. And also, weirdly, a lot more human was one of the things that I was surprised by that. If folks want to interact with Excel spreadsheets and put data in slightly strange formats that aren't entirely consistent, with LLMs, we can now kind of meet users where they are better than we could previously. And I wonder if that usability shift is going to make a massive impact to the number of solutions that get adopted.
I really think this is where we need to look really. And now, I mean, we are coming from software development background, so that's why we look under our noses, right, where we are. But I think the real shift is going to happen in an entirely different place, which is companies like that, smaller, medium-sized enterprises that they don't have software development capabilities. It means that they do have some automation, maybe mechanical automation, but they don't have the capabilities to create basically mental automation. It's something that we are dealing with for decades. I think this kind of companies that are welding, building, constructing things, moving things around, they suddenly have access to automation tools without actually learning full software development. I don't think it will be as natural as people think it will be, like just talking to a computer and it does magic. There will be some learning required. Like when I was writing a book, it required me to learn how to instruct the AI to actually write what I needed. But this is where the real value is, because it's majority of the companies are not software companies. And we are sort of in software world, we're entirely ignoring them unless they buy one of our products. And we also assume that none of the people who don't understand, never studied computers or didn't learn it on their own, they just cannot do software. But actually, this is democratization of software development. Now, and this also indirectly answers the question, will a lot of software developers lose their jobs? I really think not. I mean, many will lose their job because there are certain tasks that will be relevant. But it's like a pyramid. So more people joining the pyramid from the bottom, those companies who are not software development companies, and they create a lot of demand on software. So that will sort of create demand on more software development tools, on more automation, on more specialization. So I think this entire field of software development is going to explode, and all these companies that are just doing non-software development work, they will find ways to automate their work and remove the toil that we are talking about, the boring stuff, the digging in Excel sheets or writing documentation for the government. This is what AI is actually very good at.
It's occurred to me, I probably shouldn't refer to too many conversations that we've had offline, but I was giving it an example of how in the desktop publishing revolution, there used to be people, paste-up artists, who would put printed out bits of text for newspapers and magazines on pages, and those folks did find themselves out of a trade very quickly in the late 80s, early 90s. But one of the things that dawned on me is that those folks did not know the domain. Like if you were the paste-up artist for a computer magazine or a newspaper, it didn't matter what the words were. So the folks that are going to continue to be valuable are the ones that have domain expertise and understand the businesses that they're part of and care about business outcomes and are kind of entwined with that.
I think this is a very good point. And I even a decade ago, I was talking to a colleague I had done, and we were discussing how software development is effectively automation profession, right? So we basically go to domain expert, and we talk to them, we get their domain expertise, and we convert it to automation. But this is what software development is all about, because there is no software development as a goal, right? It's just a supporting function to convert the domain knowledge into automated domain knowledge. And I think what you're saying is makes a lot of sense, which is basically, what if domain experts can do it on their own? Now, I think it will take a long time until they can do it entirely on their own, but they can take they will take step forward. So a lot of domain experts will potentially be able to write some software, but they will also start figuring out how software works. So they will also create more demand on automation. So I think everyone will sort of grow with it, but generally, as software developers or people involved in software development, it's better if we know domain of some sort, like banking or logistics. I think that will probably make us much more valuable.
Yeah, being able to solve those problems intelligently with the knowledge of that domain and the democratization of access to contemporary business solutions is something to be hugely excited about. I think, in the 70s, people could implement processes with a bit of paper and a photocopier. And then once we got to the world of distributed computing, a VBA wasn't going to cut it anymore. And things became too complicated for, a smart person in the corner of the marketing department to solve. So hopefully we'll see a huge uptick, and maybe in terms of productivity gains that were expected from the computing revolution and the cloud revolution, maybe this will be the thing that shifts the needle of we've had all this underlying tech that's kind of building up to it, but if we can get that into the hands of everyday business people so that people in sales, marketing, operations can all save, huge amounts of time. Maybe then we'll start to see the bigger productivity gains that have been promised for so long.
And it is exactly that. So in software, we know that when we get to the maturity I was talking about earlier, for example, cloud native maturity, where we have great cloud native platforms that do full test automation and delivery and everything, and you can deploy your changes in few minutes to production with certainty. When you get to that point, then a lot of toil is taken away. So a lot of stupid work is taken away, and you can focus on actually building the features. And in a way, that's exactly what we met in that company that we you were talking about. Is that massive amount of their effort is going into documentation, analyzing the standards, preparing the forms for the government, all kind of things that they can be automated. And then what's going to happen then, right? So let's say third or half of their time will be freed to do something else. And I'm sure we are, as humans, we will figure out what to do with that time, something useful. Or not useful.
I would hope for the former, but leisure time is also an important thing. We are just about getting up to time. Should we be promoting the book and the mini book? I gather there's a 40-page sort of slimmed down version that people will be able to acquire.
Yes. So I will be very happy to share the mini book, which is sort of a teaser for the full book, explains the concept and the model. And the general idea is that the new wave of innovation is coming, and we need to get ready to it. And there is a process of how to get ready and what to do to be effective in transitioning to AI native. And the book will be ready in about 3 to 4 months from now. So if you download the mini book and subscribe to the newsletter, then we will let you know when the book is out. And hopefully the book will help you to actually see a consistent and repeatable way how to go through waves of innovation. So whatever new comes at you, you will be ready to that new wave of innovation.
That was it for this episode. I've been your host, Deejay, and I'd like to thank you for hanging out with us. But I'm really looking forward to the full version of the book, and in particular that menu of patterns that is going to describe the various ways that organizations can make themselves more able to change and adapt. Trying to prognosticate about how AI exactly is going to affect everything is maybe a fool's errand, but being able to put yourself in a position where you can adapt to whichever changes come about, that seems to be a sensible route to go down. This was our first episode, so I hope that you've enjoyed it, and it's been great having you along for the path of the conversation. If you want to get in touch about what you liked, what you didn't like, or who you might want me to chat to next, please email any ideas to wavesofinnovation@re-sync.com. That's re-cinq.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or point them to the Waves of Innovation community. It all helps us to keep sharing the knowledge. Be good to each other, and I'll catch you on the next one.